Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first United Cloudcast. Is that what we're going to call it today? I don't know. It's our pilot.
Working
We're very
title
excited.
still, yeah.
Yeah. I'm joined by Hameem from Tactic Talk, as I always will be. I kind of want to introduce you as something to do with United, like I don't know, the big red machine or something like that. But you haven't really got like a
Yeah, so I
United
stayed
sort
away
of thing
from
like
the
I'm United
United
about.
niche because when I first started, I was like, if I go into the United niche, I'm more likely to not be taken seriously. I don't know if you've experienced that. Like from other football fans, they just like categorize you as just the United fan. So like your
Yeah,
opinions
I've
aren't
had that
taken.
for sure.
So yeah, but I am a big red. So that counts.
You're a machine as well, mate,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
everyone will
mate.
find that out soon. Anyway, we've got quite a bit to talk about today, don't we? And
Yeah.
the sort of format of these episodes, I mean, I want to be just as open with everyone as I can be. The format's going to be this, what's it you called it, the Gegenpressing section at the start.
Yeah.
Could you explain what our plan is with that to everyone?
Yes, so it's probably a bit backwards. Obviously, this being the United Cloud podcast, it makes sense for Izaak to introduce it. But I'm sort of here, I don't want to say host because that's a bit jarring, but I'm just here as like the bloke that's going to bring the conversation forward, sort of taking the role of like your followers and bringing questions to Izaak that you might have and the United social media landscape is sort of currently talking about. So the Gegenpress section, to kick off the start of the podcast, was sort of bringing forward the relevant pieces in social media related to Manchester United. And the way we were thinking of measuring these relevant pieces is looking directly at the content on United Cloud and seeing which ones have the most engagement, and ultimately the ones with the most engagement are the ones that most people are interested about. So the Gegenpressing section, all action, intense conversation, a 5-minute, 6-minute section where I pose to Izaak his best performing posts, and Izaak sort of covers them as quickly and concisely as possible, and starts the conversation in pretty intense fashion. So I don't know if I've done the section.
I think as well, like, I think you definitely have, and I think it can almost like seem like, oh, you know, what's this for? Just talking about Instagram posts, but the actual embedded content within there is huge. So we've got some this week about Onana being stranded, and we've got some, of course, about Rasmus Højlund and the way that he runs the channel. So I'm excited to get into that. And after the Gegenpressing, then we've got like a main subject and then like a maybe secondary main subject. We've got some different sort of gimmicks we want to introduce, like the Ten Hag meter. Do you want to explain the Ten Hag meter to everyone?
Yeah, so it's a play on the name Ten Hag. And we were thinking of ranking players, whether that's signings or players we have currently in the team, using this Ten Hag scale that me and Izaak sort of came up with over a coffee. I don't know if you've heard the story about Tuchel and Pep Guardiola talking like football strategy over coffee, but it's me and Izaak over a coffee talking about the Ten Hag scale and how it will revolutionise the podcasting game. Don't know if it's going to quite do that, but we'll give it a go. Hopefully it's something interesting that the fans of United Cloud are interested in. And yeah, I think we should kick straight into it and talk about your best performing post of the last month. This was a quote from Leandro Martinez, who is obviously currently injured, coming back into the squad. A quote talking about United's chances in the FA Cup. It got 1.6 million reach. Izaak, as concisely as possible, what do you make of Leandro's ideas and potentially United's chances in winning the FA Cup?
I think Leandro Martinez has been a huge miss, first and foremost. I think, you know, you look at what's troubled us this season in the build-up, especially, and in terms of our ability to mark cutbacks. And Leandro Martinez solved a lot of those problems on his own. I think, yeah, he's shown great ambition with this quote about wanting to win the FA Cup, and I'm, very happy that the Post performed so well. Actually, I was quite surprised, but last season I was there at the FA Cup final. It was so close, and it just felt like we know with Ten Hag, we know how we want to develop as a team. We know how we want to progress through cup competitions, and I think. I'm surprised we do one more this season. Of course, we need a nice run, and we've now got a chance to actually build some momentum, not having 4 different fronts to fight on. Obviously, last season, the Carabao Cup, the Champions League are out of those now. So we've got a bit of time to focus on the FA Cup, Newport on the weekend, and hopefully we're in a pretty decent position.
That's perfectly covered, mate. We'll move on to the next one, which is Højlund running the channels. This was a post that Izaak put out on his opinion on why Højlund has struggled recently at United, obviously competing for a lot of aerial duels, playing in a team that's asking him to take the ball with his back to play quite often. Izaak made a good observation of Højlund's time at Atalanta, where Højlund's speciality almost was running the channels and using his massive pace, which I feel like United haven't utilised. This post did 40,000 reach and got 8,000 likes, so quite a relevant topic right now. Izaak, have you got anything to add to what you said initially and how you think we can better unlock Højlund's potential?
I think quite a lot of the talk about Højlund has obviously been the goals that he's scored, but I think the way that Ten Hag has used Højlund completely changed in the last couple of games. I think typically this season there's been long balls fired into him. He's not necessarily the most proficient at taking super long kicks from Onana, for example, taking them down and controlling the ball. That's not his game. That's never been his game. It will come with time and experience and practice, but he's somebody who wants to get in behind. He uses his frame to roll defenders, to explode past defenders, to run into the channels, to receive the ball. A bit of trickery. He's a very technical player, as we've seen. Look at what he did to Mickey van der Ven. That's a perfect example of Højlund running the channels, and he did that at Atalanta all the time, and that's something we haven't seen enough at Manchester United. So I am really quite encouraged by what he did, and I'm hoping that Højlund can do more of that. If he does more of that, he'll definitely score more goals.
Just to touch on that, mate, we saw glimpses of his sort of his powerful running ability and running the channels ability in the Champions League. I'd argue them matches that we saw them in was very transition-based matches. There was a lot of transitions happening, and that's probably why we saw it. In the Premier League, however, we're coming up against a lot more compact teams and less space for Højlund to do that. How do we potentially get Højlund running the channels and using his pace in behind in matches where, it's not end-to-end transition football?
I think United need to get much better at sort of creating a false transition, and the way that you do that is by moving the ball more quickly. Cutting a long story short. So look, I think it's very much how do we maintain pressure? How do we maintain structure? We obviously, even in these more sort of fixed games, we don't have the ability to exert pressure ourselves. If you can exert pressure, you can win the ball back very quickly, counter press. Have control through pressure, sustained pressure territory. Then you get a situation where you look at the sort of goals that Dominic Solanke is scoring at Bournemouth, and a lot of them comes from quick counter presses, and that's something that United want to do. We've got the most high regains in the league, so it's something where hopefully we can develop tactically as a team, and then probably will reap the rewards.
That's perfectly summed up. We will talk slightly more on that in our next section, where we will do a more deep dive into United's tactics in the first phase, second phase, and final phase of play. But we will swiftly move on. That's the point of the Gegenpress section. The next one we were talking about, you mentioned it in the intro, was a post on Onana being stranded. This got 138,000 reach, and I feel like people engaged with it because it was sort of comical and sort of summed up Onana in a football sense, not in just like it being a funny story, but him being stranded 150 miles away from where he should be. Surely there's there's something to say about that, Izaak.
Yeah, I really want Onana to do well. I really want him to do well, and I think it was definitely the right decision to move on from David De Gea. So I don't want to get down that rabbit hole. Obviously, it's not been perfect for him. At the same time, I don't think it's been quite as bad as some have made out. I think some of Onana's underlying stats are pretty good. Like his goal prevention isn't awful, but yeah, of course, he's made quite a lot of mistakes, quite a lot of comical mistakes too, and this kind of just sums it all up, really. However, you can't fault his dedication, and the guy was going to play 2 games in 24 hours, or at least be part of the squad for 2 games in 24 hours, and showed an immense amount of dedication to try and travel over to the Ivory Coast and to the Cameroon's game. So, fair if something goes wrong, you're finished. So, yeah, quite a funny situation. He obviously did play against Senegal, maybe left a little bit to be desired for some of his goalkeeping in that game, but yeah, sums it all up, really, doesn't it?
On that, obviously, just a little touch point from that, Onana's leaving, which opens up an opportunity for Altay Bayandire, who, United fans have a bit of a knack for players who aren't playing. We sort of knight them as the saviour, as they're so much better than what we already have. Just a little thing on what you think Bayandire could bring to the table and what to expect from him.
It's interesting. I think it's a classic story with Manchester United fans of, as you say, almost if you're not in the team, you're on better terms with the fans than you are if you are in the team. Especially when we're inconsistent, especially when we're losing games, especially when players are making mistakes. I've not seen enough of Bayandire to be able to give you a coherent summary of his qualities. I mean, he looks like he's a decent goalkeeper. I heard a couple of pretty bad references when we were linked with him for the first time, which was back in the January. I actually had an exclusive bit of information about him. Failing a medical with Manchester United back in January before we did sign him. Obviously now we do have him, and he's there, and we'll probably see him play in the FA Cup. So, no, I mean, he's obviously someone that Ten Hag has rated for a while. Ten Hag can obviously feel that he can be a good backup and deliver on his tactical demands. So we'll see how the dynamics of the team change. When quite a lot of people were clamouring for him to come in, I was saying, well, yeah, I get it, but I think we want to make the most of Onana's ability on the ball. We've definitely not seen that at United, and we need to give him more time to develop that. We need to give the team more time to get used to it. It's annoying to have to rotate your goalkeeper. I think Ten Hag is someone who loves having a settled team, and the goalkeeper is the most important position in a settled team, given that they're probably rotated the least. So, yeah, it's an annoying situation. I don't know what to expect from Bayandire. We'll see on the weekend, and we'll see moving forward.
It'll be funny to see, not that I wish him a bad performance or anything, but the people with the saviour complex on Bayandire, if he was to have a shocker against Newport in the FA Cup, people might have their fantasy shattered and the sort of outrage from that might be funny to see on socials. We have got to the end of the Gegenpress section. We had a couple more subjects to cover, but we didn't want to drag it out too much. We've just got one more thing for you, mate. This was your final post on Ratcliffe building a new training ground. Clearly captured the imaginations of Manchester United fans. Got 216,000 reach with 20,000 likes. What are your thoughts on Ineos's development, their first steps? We're going to get into it with our main conversation, which will follow this up. But just quickly on the training ground.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, Ineos have made a couple of big moves already, and they're not even through the door yet. Manchester United definitely need a new training ground, and we need at least an upgraded stadium. I think I've typically been in the camp who would argue that maybe a new stadium's a good idea. My seat at Old Trafford's quite high up. It's quite annoying to get to, and I realise compared to other grounds, there's much more better internal infrastructure in the stadium. And there are structural issues. There's things where it's clearly out of date. And you look at the other elite stadiums in the Premier League and you think, wow, why don't we have this? At the same time, Old Trafford's an historic ground, so I wouldn't necessarily be against it if they wanted to just renovate it. Training ground, on the other hand, there's no reason not to completely go overboard. Obviously, Ronaldo was very critical of our training ground, quite famously. But I think that it's something where it's very obvious sign that Ineos are not messing around. Looking for a completely new place is something which it's going to cost a bit of money, and they're willing to put the money down. So I'm excited about that.
So that's the end of the Gegenpress section. Let's talk about Ineos more specifically. We're filming this a day after the news broke that Ineos have appointed the former CFO of Manchester City, Omar Berrada, and has appointed them as a CEO of Manchester United. Initial thoughts on the appointment and maybe what this could mean as a first appointment for Ineos?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's important, to recognise the difference between normal. I had a couple of people attacking me on Twitter for saying CFO when I meant it in terms of the footballing business vernacular rather than typical business vernacular. Chief Football Operations Officer he was, I think, his last role. He's also been the COO at City, at the City Group too. Worth considering, this is also for the entire City Group rather than just Manchester City. So it's a guy who's very senior, tipped to become the new director of football as well, or operation, whatever, football operation. I don't know what their titles are. I don't really care too much for the City Group's internal structure, although it might be something we look to steal some more things from. I think it's unbelievable. Manchester United taking somebody from Manchester City anyway is quite rare. I don't know if it's something which is more common in the business side, but I can't remember the last time I saw something like this on such a high level. I think people have got to remember there's people who are probably harbouring some concerns about, his affiliation with City, the fact he was there for, over a decade. He's somebody who clearly loved his time at Manchester City too. At the same time, it's very different on the business side. At the end of the day, we're getting a really good operator in, somebody who's worked very closely with elites in the game for the last 15, 20 years. It's a fantastic move, and it's a move of incredible it's a statement from Ineos, and I think there's not really much else they could have done appointments wise that would have made people look up from their screen almost. Like it's taking somebody from City, regardless of his experience and expertise, is an incredible step.
See, I'm gonna play devil's advocate. Obviously, Isaac, you might know Isaac as forever the optimist. Isaac would claim he's a realist and not someone that's gonna, get really pessimistic about anything without it being rational. But I'm gonna play devil's advocate. You said that you didn't care about City's structure when referencing Berrada. I, however, think there's quite a lot to look into in City's structure and Berrada's past experiences at City and how he moved through the ranks. He was actually a head of sponsorship at Barcelona from 2004 to 2011 and moved over to director of partnership and sales into Manchester City specifically in 2011. This is something that isn't necessarily football operations based. It was very much a commercial move. This is something that preempted where City was going, because in 2012 they hired Ferran Soriano, who was the vice CEO of Barcelona, as a CEO of Manchester City. And the reason I mention this is there's a lot of parallels to be drawn to Manchester United in that regard. Soriano came in a newly formed CEO role where City intentionally separated the commercial side of things with the football inside. Soriano taking over the commercial side, and Berrada and some guy called Tom Glick taking over the commercial side of things. And that was how City Group developed. And it all culminated... Manchester City developed. And it all culminated when Soriano started to develop the City Group and acquire multiple clubs to the network. And I think that's where Berrada, if you look at it with that context, Berrada then became Senior VP Group Commercial Director. And I'm focusing on the word group there because this was the context of the City Group forming in the early 2010s. I'd argue that Berrada's experience was more commercial, with making sure there was a synergy between all of the clubs that City acquired and Manchester City's brand. And he clearly did a good job at that. He moved on to Chief Operating Officer, which again isn't something football orientated. So it was only 2020 when he became a CFO, Chief Operating Officer. And his prior 9 years experience was more City group based and network team based. So I was, with that context in mind, how qualified is he to do this job specifically as a CEO of Manchester United? And also, like, are we actually expecting him to be football orientated or more leaning on his experience of establishing networks with Manchester City? Because I feel like that could be something that Ineos look to do in the future, and maybe that's something that Berrada's expertise is there for.
I think the Ineos group will want to have a system where all of the clubs are related in a network, sort of satellite clubs, a little bit like City. I think that's going to be potentially the future of modern football. Obviously, you can see what Todd Bowley's doing at Chelsea as well, with Strasbourg, etc. I wouldn't be surprised if United do a similar thing with Nice and Lausanne in Switzerland, which are also owned by Ineos. Obviously, we'll see how it goes in the next few years with the completion of the takeover process, and hopefully Ineos do become majority owners sooner rather than later. I do hear your concern in terms of, like, is it a footballing appointment or not? But I think the CEO is not there to make footballing decisions, without delegation and without working with the team around him. I think the problem that people had with Ed Woodward was that he wasn't a footballing man and got too involved in that. Now, Berrada has got footballing experience, of course, and I think he certainly is a man who loves football and works in football. And you can see the way that he talks, in some of the City documentaries when he's interviewed. Clearly a very rational thinker, thinking about contracts, thinking about profiles of players, thinking about the youth development as well, which will be important for United, thinking about how you can generate a system of FFP sustainability. I mean, it's quite ironic talking about that from a Manchester City point of view, but of course, City are able to sell their assets far more easily than United. We've really struggled to sell academy products. We've really struggled to sell players who are no longer of significant use to us, whereas City are always able to garner a high fee. So I think that Berrada's role there is pretty clear, and it's pretty clear why they wanted to make him, potentially to become the new footballing director later. I think United need somebody who is more qualified in the business side of things as well. I think people praised Ed Woodward's role at Manchester United in terms of the amount he grew the business and the amount of brand deals that we got, but this is one of the easiest brands in the entire world to get a brand deal with. It's not exactly you haven't got to move a mountain to get a brand deal at Manchester United. So
I feel like I could do like a decent sale. Give me a Man United brand and a Man United PowerPoint, and I'm sure I could get like a couple quid down the door.
yeah, I'm sure you could easily. I think there's people far less qualified than me and you who could do that job. Even it's. I'm obviously saying that from a position of slight ignorance, but at the end of the day, it's a huge brand which anyone would want to work with. Anyone bite your hand off to work with Manchester United for one. They clearly like Berrada. They clearly like what he's done. And the Glazers aren't idiots. Like, they know that Manchester United have been underperforming with their direction and with what they've been doing financially and obviously as a footballing institution. So they're not gonna say no to very good help here. And anyone's recommended Berrada to them, and obviously they saw it through. But the original sort of stipulation that everyone thought was gonna, or the situation everyone thought was gonna happen, was that Jean-Claude Blanc would be the new CEO, who's currently the CEO of Ineos Sport, and has a seat on the board of Sir Dave Brailsford. By not having Blanc as a CEO, but still having him involved as Ineos CEO and having a seat on the board, Ineos essentially get more influence over United, because they've now got a CEO who they trust, who they've appointed, who they've identified, and they've obviously got Blanc on the board too. So, if anything, I think it's a positive step in terms of how much control the Ineos have. So I quite like that part of it too.
I just wanted to add on that.
I get the concern.
I just wanted to add on that quickly.
Yeah, go on.
I just noticed a parallel to City culminating their sort of band of Spanish executives in the early 2010s. They actually had cheeky, I don't know how to say his second name, Berrigistain, if you might have heard
something like that,
yeah. They had him as a director, which was one level above Ferran Soriano. Soriano came in, and he was very football-orientated man, but his role was very much dependent on establishing that network of the City group and being an innovative force in that sort of endeavour. And Cheeky was above him and sort of oversaw that process. I'm seeing a parallel here with Blanc being the Ineos director. I'm not sure of his official title. And then maybe Berrada sort of replicating what Soriano did, making sure like the strategy of Manchester United is very consolidated, and also making sure that's transferable across a potential network. And then maybe the rumours of us potentially poaching Dan Ashworth, Paul Mitchell as well to join the team. It's starting to make sense that we're sort of almost ripping off what City did. You know, City looked at their most successful team in their era when they first changed ownership and thought, let's just copy them, copy their structure, even poach some of their best people. I feel like we're doing pretty much the exact same thing, which is ironic because we're doing it 12 years later, but like surely there's something to be said for that parallel there.
No, I think that's a really good point. And I honestly, I think people need to probably wake up to the idea that Ineos probably will do this satellite club thing. I think what you say about Ashworth and Mitchell is true. Maybe there's a case where one of Ashworth and Mitchell has a role at Manchester United and the other one's got a role at Ineos or Ineos Sport, and that there's eventually a multi-club sort of system. I think the biggest advantage of a multi-club system from a tactical perspective, at least, is that you can loan players out to teams where you know exactly the style of play and the principles which a club uses. Perfect for development. You see so many of Manchester United's loans in the last 10, 15 years being for players going out to clubs where they just do not fit the tactical approach, and therefore we've not probably generated as much from our youth academy as we would have liked to have, because players haven't developed fully by the time we sold them, and players haven't been as useful for us, and we haven't had as many academy graduates who've gone through loan pathways. I think most of the players who have come through the academy have developed in the first team with the manager there at the time. Obviously, we've had conflicting styles of play anyway. So having an established sort of style of football, established way of doing business across multiple different clubs with these very capable executives working on that, it makes a lot of sense. And Berrada is somebody who knows how that works, as you say. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's exactly what we see with Ashworth and Mitchell, and it's quite an exciting prospect, really. At the same time, the purist in me, I'm not sure if I can really agree with the lack of competitive element of owning so many clubs. Like, what happens if you own a club in France, Nice, who are essentially a feeder club to United and are one of the best clubs in that country? What if you own clubs in Switzerland and in Brazil who are outstanding compared to the competition, but they're all feeding up to Manchester United? It only leads to more centralisation for the Premier League. And I don't want to get caught off on a tangent, but I don't know if that's necessarily the most fair idea, but I guess we're going to be the ones reaping the rewards anyway. Yeah,
we threw ethics out the window after 18 years of Glazer ownership. We just want success now. Ethics can be a secondary... No, but I do understand what you mean. The purist in me has concerns, but like you said, that's a whole different conversation. We could talk about the executive movements of people for quite a while, but something you said there that could segue us over to our next topic of conversation, which is United's tactics. You were talking about transferring a tactical identity across multiple clubs, which is funny because we're yet to develop a tactical identity, a consolidated one. I do see a vision, unlike a lot of United fans, but we're yet to develop one at Manchester United. So to jump the gun, I know what you're saying, but to jump the gun and say, well, let's transfer it over to other clubs, I think that's their long-term plan. But how do we better develop our own tactical identity before we move on to that sort of step with network clubs? What do you think Erik Ten Hag can do to better establish a tactical identity?
I think, you're looking at sort of tactical identities that are associated with managers, associated with clubs. Manchester United have often been a club who do play transitional, end-to-end football, exciting football. That's the sort of way this club has scored so many of its iconic goals. They've been on transitions. And I think Ten Hag is someone who's undoubtedly proven this season that he is an arch pragmatist. He's not somebody who's going to sit down with a set of principles and demand that everyone adapts to those principles every single game. He is willing to compromise, but at the same time, I think some of his compromises have gone too far. Others of his compromises have led to more problems than they've actually created. Obviously, we've got a slightly incohesive build-up structure. I say slightly; it's been pretty bad for most of the season, where we've got 3 players in the first line and just 1 player in the second line, because he likes to have 6 across the front line to create overloads. But United haven't had a technical quality in that first and second line this season to be able to capitalize from anything on the final line. From be able to capitalize from the overloads. So we're in a situation where we've now got Martinez coming back, who's obviously technically very gifted. We've got Casemiro coming back, who gives more security on transition, so can allow you to be a bit more expansive. And maybe you look at a situation where the 3-1 build-up structure actually works just because of the individual brilliance, I should say, the tactical ability, the technical ability of these players.
I just wanted to pick up something you said there about the 3-1 build-up structure. Are you saying that's intentional, or is it out of incompetence of the players, or like Ten Hag in establishing the 3-2 build-up structure? Because most, possession-based teams, like you rightly mentioned, build up with a 3-2, where they have 3 players and 2 in front of them. You see Tottenham, for example, with their inverted fullbacks, they seem to have established a 3-2. Man City have very different ways of doing it. They can do it with Stones dropping in from centre-back. They can do it with Walker, or previously Cancelo, Rico Lewis. They're all competent enough to play the 3-2. Why do you think, with all that background information of success, Ten Hag is still opting for the 3-1? Do you think it's intentional, or do you think it's because his players aren't doing his role? Like I would have thought that Ten Hag wants the 3-2, but you're saying that it's an intentional thing from Ten Hag to build up in a 3-1.
Rationally, the only way that makes sense is that Ten Hag is doing a 3-1 because he wants that 6 across the final line, and the only reason why I say that is because it's probably easier and safer to do a 3-2. Ten Hag obviously wants like really high regains. He wants to win the ball back quickly, and United actually have got pretty decent underlying stats in that regard. The problem is that with a 3, if you're losing the ball, you've got 6 across the front line. You'd obviously win it back more easily, but you're not backing up the press in the same way. I think we've seen a little bit with Diogo Dalot coming inside this season. You do have a fullback watching the sort of the half space in a deeper area for a counter attack and backing that up. But the fullbacks themselves haven't actually gone on and backed the press as I'd like to see them do. And I think that when you're using a 3-1 structure, it means obviously you can get, you lose a ball, you can get your 6 in the front line pressing more aggressively. And I try to look at it from a out of possession perspective, because in possession it just doesn't make any sense. Obviously we haven't got a technical enough midfielder to be able to do that one position. I mean, Mainoo's tried his best. Casemiro tried his best at the start of the season and probably got himself injured doing it. I would much rather see a 3-2, and I'd rather him switch into that. But I think he's like trying to. He's moving away from his principles so much. He's just trying to hold on to something. I don't know. It's a difficult one to rationalise.
When you said Casemiro was trying to do it at the start of the season, I'd argue, like, when I was witnessing how open we were playing the 3-1 then, I was thinking it was out of incompetence, not because it was intentional. I was thinking that Lissandro and Luke Shaw were supposed to be taking turns of supporting Casemiro in the build-up to form the 3-2. But because we were still like ironing out how to play this way, they just weren't doing it at the right times. And I think we saw examples of Lissandro dropping into midfield to create that 3-2, or Luke Shaw doing the exact same thing. But I just didn't think we refined it well enough before all our players started getting injured. So when we were playing the 3-1, I was like, this is completely like dysfunctional. We're doing it because we're incompetent in doing what Ten Hag wants to do. But now we've been doing it for like since then with Kobe Mainu. No one's even tried to take up that baton and become the 3-2 from defence. And it's like, is it intentional? And I don't know, I'm struggling with that, because it's like, I don't see a world where a 3-1 works in the Premier League.
Interestingly, and obviously Ten Hag really wanted to sign Onana. If you have Onana splitting the centre-backs, if you then got a 3 and then you can push one of them up, so Martinez, for example, going up into the second line, we didn't see this enough, as you say, because Martinez got injured, and I think it's such a massive tactical loss, as was Casemiro, although he wasn't playing especially well when he got injured. I think if you have Onana stepping forward and you have Onana splitting the 2 in the first line, and then you can push Martinez up and you maintain that sort of 3-2 with Onana, and then you get 6 across the front line, I think that's what Ten Hag wants. We haven't had time to do that. He's had to be pragmatic. I think he's stuck to it out of, I know Martinez will come back, and when he is back, he's going to be the most important player of my team. And I know that next season I might be able to sign a better deputy for him, somebody other than Johnny Evans. No disrespect to Johnny Evans, who's been fantastic, but he's not got the same, technical ability and sort of physical ability as Martinez to do that.
Just before you move on to that, just wanted to mention some stats that I picked out for Evans deputising Martinez, if I can find them. Just a second. So just on that, I wanted to say that in terms of progressive passes into the final third, Leandro Martinez at his best last season was averaging 6.22 per 90, and progressive passes in general, which discounts the first 40% of the pitch, he was averaging 5.78 per 90. Johnny Evans, meanwhile, I think he's done a good job deputising, so far this season has been averaging 2.55 passes into the final third and 2.83 progressive passes, which are competent numbers, but almost half the numbers of Leandro Martinez. So it's no surprise that our progression in the first phase of play hasn't been as perfect as possible. Just some stats to back up what you're saying there, Isaac.
Yeah, very good, very good. I like the preparation. It's excellent stats.
I came prepared.
I love it. I think Evans, he obviously has done well, and came in as a 5th choice centre back, and probably wouldn't expect to play anywhere near this much. Obviously, Varane had a nice dynamic with Martinez, where Varane would often carry it and Martinez would pass it, and Lindelof did okay last season too, and even he's been injured lately. I think it's very much a case of, if Martinez ever gets injured again, we cannot allow the entire tactical system to fall apart. Look, it is. I guess you could argue, and I would probably be in the camp of saying, yes, it is incompetence if you are so reliant on one individual. At the same time, I think Lisandro Martinez is a player of, world-class ability who's got, very unique assets, and his ability in possession and his tactical sort of dexterity and flexibility in possession as well is something which is irreplaceable. And we have obviously struggled to replace it of any sort of competent means. It's certainly in terms of in possession this season, whilst, the guys who have played instead of him have been good. Even Luke Shaw was able to deputise for him, has the sort of range of passing that Martinez has. But he's been injured the whole time. And when he has been there, we've had to play him left back because, you need the creative quality. So it is all compromises. And I think the entire Ten Hag sort of spiral downhill has been just compromise upon compromise, and compromising upon the failed solutions of previous compromises. And it just comes to a situation where you're currently always trying to fix things. Now he's got his guys back. Now he's got his almost unicorn in possession in Lisandro Martinez back. I do think we'll see a big improvement from United. And it's not an ideal structure, but as I talked about Onana coming more into prominence and Martinez being there, and even Mason Mount receiving on the half turn, we can't ignore that. There's so much better to come from this team. And obviously I'm not going to sack Ten Hag. I think you're probably saying, but I do think that with players back, get a better tactical setup for sure.
It's the first I've heard Leandro Martinez being called a unicorn. I mean, the Stretford end tends to chant the butcher, but the unicorn might not roll off the tongue just as well.
The unicorn of Buenos Aires.
Yeah. So, moving the conversation further up the pitch, we're going to talk about the second phase of possession, which we sort of talked about, but more in detail with the midfield, and then finish it off with the final phase. I wanted to, first of all, bring to you like an ideal proposition of what I thought Ten Hag was trying to do with the midfield, based off his summer signings. And I still think he might be trying to do this. And then I want you to make your thoughts on it, your comments, your observations, and whether I'm completely wrong in your opinion, or whether you could see this happening in the future. So I think we saw this at the start of the season. Obviously, we signed Mason Mount in midfield. Casemiro had a very good season, very solid season last year. And obviously, we're not going to replace Bruno Fernandes anytime soon. So I'd argue in midfield, like you said, like most teams do in the final third of possession, they create players in the 5 attacking lanes. So you got the left wing, you got the left half space, you've got the striker, right half space, right wing. And I feel like last season we only had 4 attacking lanes occupied. And that was mostly because of the trade-off we got from Eriksen being more deeper. I think Eriksen last season, he was in the 93rd percentile of progressive actions from a deeper position, but he was also in like the 13th percentile for ball recoveries in the final third. So that clearly shows with data, Eriksen's profile was a deeper profile. Compare that with Mason Mount, who doesn't have much progressive actions in the first third, but is like 94th, 95th percentile for ball recoveries in the final third for an attacker. I thought that was a very intentional switch from Ten Hag signing Mason Mount and moving a player that we had doing a lot of ball progression and getting an attacking ball recoverer to help bolster our attacking lanes, which previously had 4 players occupying the attacking lanes. I think Mason Mount was bought with the intention of creating the 5 players occupying the 5 attacking lanes. And that's why in the first phase of possession, I thought we'd do a 3-2 and then a 2-3. So there you have 5 in the first phase, 5 in the second phase. It's not worked out like that. In Wolves, we saw, the Wolves match at the start where we had Núñez just running through midfield. I think we saw an intention of us trying to play like that because Mason Mount was very advanced with Bruno Fernandes and we had 5 players attacking, but there was no balance in what we were trying to do. I think with Mason Mount coming back, with all these players coming back, Leandro Martinez, I still believe in my idealistic tactical brain that we're trying to do the 3-2 and Mason Mount and Bruno Fernandes in the right and left half space to create a 3-2-2-3, the WM formation. Am I completely wrong? Is this possible? Is Casemiro going to feature as the anchor in midfield, or will it be Kobbie Mainoo? Or are we just going to deviate from this completely? I don't know, mate. Like, you tell me. Like, this is my ideal head, but clearly Ten Hag's not thinking the same way. And I'm not saying I'm more qualified than Ten Hag, far from it. I'm just trying to understand what he's doing, because right now I don't really understand.
I mean, I think that's something that we've seen bits of. I do think Ten Hag likes a 6 across the front line, as we discussed as well. I think his ideal scenario is the fullbacks come in to support whoever the anchoring midfielder is in that 2. Or indeed Martinez steps up and Onana steps up too. I do think he wants to have 2 because it's logical to have 2. All the best teams have got 2 because you need to have a player on the left and on the right to have enough angles available to you in build up. But I do think that, you know, when you see how it's gone this season, you know, he has had, as we said, he had all these injuries. So look, I mean, for me, I think Dalot or Shaw, who are definitely his first choice 2 fullbacks when everybody's fit and on form, often would come into that 2. Otherwise, they'd step further out wide and hold the width to try and make a 6 rather than a 5. But both of them are also capable of playing in that 3 too. I think Mason Mount is someone who's just in the last line. I think Mason Mount is always going to be the last line, looking to receive his back to goal to connect the attack and the defence. Sort of in that, if you're going to break the last line down into smaller lines, he would be in the 2, let's say, it's before the 3, or before the 4, even if we have the fullbacks pushing up. So yeah, I think Mason Mount is a connector in that team. I think he's very much somebody who's an outlet who can, like, once we have broken the press, he can capitalise on it. There were too many times last season where Fernandes or Eriksen would find a line-breaking pass and there's nobody there to capitalise on that effectively. And that's what Mount can do with his back to goal. Even, from Martinez, I'm looking forward to seeing all of those Martinez line breakers straight into Mount. I think that's what he's there for. I think that's why he signed him, as well as obviously his work out of possession. So look, I don't know. We can't say for sure yet how exactly it's going to line up, and sort of I don't know what Ten Hag was planning for Kobbie Mainoo's development and whether that changes his thinking. Does he use all 4 of Mainoo, Mount, Fernandes, and Casemiro? I'm not sure. I do kind of want to see what would happen with Mainoo further forward as an 8, or having Casemiro next to him, giving a bit more liberation. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I don't think I can predict now what he's going to do. I like your prediction. Hopefully that does happen, and that will be effective, I think. But I do think he's got ideas of Mainoo and Casemiro for sure.
And just to finish it off now, I think that was well summarised there. You've helped my confusion slightly. In the final phase of possession, obviously you're saying Mount will push on, be the player that receives the ball as that 2. What does that mean for the 3 in front of him? Would you ideally see a front 3 of Garnacho, Højlund and Rashford on the right, or Rashford on the left, Garnacho on the right? Is that what we're seeing moving forward?
I think Garnacho on the right has been a revelation. I think it's something that's happened, out of necessity. I don't know if it's something that Ten Hag and Garnacho have been working on behind the scenes for a while, or if it's just something that's happened recently. But he looks very comfortable receiving with his right foot. Most top teams prefer the angles that you get with a left foot on the right, and I can't disagree. Obviously you get to open the game more when you receive coming inside rather than taking it down to the byline. So I can understand why you would probably prefer a left footer, but Garnacho is fairly ambidextrous. We saw his shot against Wigan with his left foot that was fantastic, and he's got a couple of assists already in his career on his left foot, and he does use it fairly well. I certainly think he's a two-way threat, which is good. He's not just going to always go on the outside. He can cut in from the right. I don't think Rashford's worth having on the right at the moment. I don't think it makes any sense to lose the massive upside of Rashford on the left to move him to the right, whereas I think Garnacho is less of a trade-off. If anything, I think Garnacho's actually had some better games on the right than he had on the left. So that's the front 3 that I would go for. I think Mount will really help, especially if you've got Garnacho on the right-hand side running in behind. Mount loves that pass in behind, across on his right foot to an on-rushing winger, and hopefully Garnacho could receive and take it across goal. Maybe we'll see that goal scored a few times. So I think Mount coming in from the left half space, looking across, that's going to really help. And also maybe he can slide Højlund in a little bit more. We saw a couple of occasions where Højlund's been in behind and no one's been able to pick him out. And hopefully Mount, with his ability to receive and slip somebody in, we'll see more of that. Mount and Højlund could be a nice combination too. Yeah. We saw Mount and Rashford link up quite well too, actually, before he got injured.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention Rashford's goal in, was it the Wigan game? The close quarters combination with Højlund. Which game was that?
Tottenham.
Yeah, that goal. That was interesting because I think the more of that we see, if we add Mason Mount into the mix, if we can develop that close quarter combination in the final third, that might be something that really progresses our game when we have our ideal build-up structure from first phase all the way to the final phase, because we need to be better at working within that structure and working in tight spaces. Not every match has to be a transition match for our players to be effective, in my opinion. So I think you wrapped that up perfectly, mate. I've just got one final question for you to wrap up the podcast and wrap up the conversation about tactics and our build-up. If for the rest of the season we have no injuries, how do you want Ten Hag to set up Manchester United in this, whether it's a 3-1-6 or a 3-2-2-3? Which players occupy which positions? How would you do it? Just to wrap up this segment.
Onana, Dalot, Shaw, Martinez, and then Varane. Although I do think Maguire's been great. I think we've seen Martinez and Varane work better as a tried and tested partnership, and I think they've got some synergy with each other. So I'm throw that away. Then I'm not so sure on the midfield. I think it depends on how he does approach the build up. I think Mason Mount does need to start. I think the upside of Mason Mount out of possession is massive. I think the way that he can connect the players we discussed is very, very important. So I think it's Mount and Fernandes unequivocally in the starting lineup for me. And then I would probably shift towards Mainu, but I mean, I don't know if he's got I don't know how that's going to work. If you've definitely got fullbacks coming into a 3-2, then I'm having Mainu. Otherwise, I'm a little bit more concerned about his sort of, physical development and overexerting him. Maybe I'm having Casemiro instead, but we've got a squad for a reason. There's different ways you can approach this. And then I'll have Garnacho on the right, Rashford on the left, and Højlund up front. I think the front three almost picks itself at the moment. We haven't really got many options aside from those guys. And I think they're, in most Manchester United fans' minds, the best three we've got. Obviously, Anthony's not very popular at the moment. And I wouldn't be surprised for it to cash in on him in the summer. So yeah, that's my sort of view. One thing we didn't get to talk about today, we didn't get to talk about the sort of the metric through which we'd like to sort of look at footballers, the physical, tactical, technical sort of slant on things. So we can start that in our next episode for sure. But on that topic, I think that the technical and tactical level of the guys coming back is so high that it can completely change the picture. And I think we have been quite positive today. It's been quite a positive episode. You wouldn't think Manchester United had lost more games than they'd won if you listened to this. But I do think that there are better things to come. And maybe we're delusional, maybe we're living in our own little worlds. But I do think there's something of a vision, as you said, even if it's not a masterpiece or a final plan. I can kind of see what Ten Hag's trying to do here.
See, whether you think we're optimists or pessimists, we're forever trying to rationalise what Ten Hag is up to. And I think that's the best way to put it. I mean, people are probably going to listen to it and be like, these guys are tapped, like, deluded. But, the best way forward is to rationalise what we're seeing. And I think there is a lot of rational observations to look at. So, yeah, Isaac, I think for a first episode, there's a lot of conversation threads that we could have talked about for about an hour each conversation thread, but I think we covered all bases. And yeah, well, how do you think that went?
I think that was great. I think everybody will enjoy it. I do think we've got a lot we can add. We've got a lot of different ways we can make it flow better, and I think as a pilot, it's fantastic. So yeah, I'm happy with that, big time. This is still on record, I think, isn't it? Which is fine by me. If everyone wants to listen to our little debrief, I don't know, but I think I'm excited to see where this goes, mate. Very good.
Good stuff, yeah. So with that, the first episode of the United Cloud podcast, working title. We're still, if you have any suggestions, please let Isaac know. Wrapped up and complete.